Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Off Script with Pastor Jared and
former intern Aaron Russell.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Aaron, the former intern,
Yeah.
ATFI, is back, formerly hashtag ATI, back in the studio today.
Yeah.
Back in town. What brings you back in town?
We were recording a video for our D-Now coming up in February.
Okay. And you know the best place to record something is here at Isaac Russell Studios.
Yeah, that's right.
So glad to have you back. But we just thought that since Aaron's back for the day and around the office, that if we could sneak in for a quick podcast, that might be fun for the people who. This one's for the deep dive people who've been with us from the beginning.
That's right, the OGs.
Yeah, the ones who remember the Aaron the intern episodes, which there were many. By the end, you know, there was quite
fun.
So, Aaron, you've been in Brownsville Baptist for how long now? A year?
A year and 3 months.
A year and 3 months. So,
yeah, that's right.
Post-honeymoon period.
Yeah.
And
still a honeymoon.
And so I thought it would be cool just thinking about what we could talk about, something that would maybe benefit the listener and that would be interested in is just to kind of, this is a unique snapshot in the trajectory of your ministry. So, I think a lot of church members don't always understand what it's like on the pastoral side of things. And so much as we can let them into the world and see the good, the bad, the ugly, it's always, I think, just for the better to know. And so where you kind of left at Kirby was grown up in church, had pretty extensive experience in the inside at Kirby Woods, a very knowledgeable church member, some seminary level classes taken through Mid-America,
right,
and then at least the last portion before you left, some intern time here with the Kirby staff, and now you are full time. What's the official title? Student pastor or
pastor over students and communications?
Okay, very good. So. You're full-time, you're ordained, you've got a real job, a real big boy job. And so I thought it would be interesting maybe to the listener to ask, what are some year one reflections you have?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be about Brownsville, just things that would be true no matter where you went.
Right.
Things that you learned about ministry, things that you learned about serving in a full-time church capacity. What's the transition like from member to intern to full-time pastor?
Yeah.
What are some things you think normal, I hate to use the term lay people, but what do lay people not understand about the role? Just personal reflections that you've had as you've now been for sure baptized into ministry after 1 year of a for real ministry job.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these things will be things that kind of like you're saying, I already knew to be true. But there's a progression to understanding these things. Like, I mean, you think about, if you go to a Grizzlies game, Zoe and I were, at a Grizzlies game last night. We decided to, treat ourselves to a Grizzlies game. And, if you're sitting there in the audience watching and you've never been, a basketball coach before, you can kind of understand what's going on. You kind of get a feel for what's going on. But once you're that coach and the pressure's on you, you're not one of the players, but you're, there making a lot of the decisions and helping boost the morale of the team. There's a much different perspective, I imagine, between an NBA coach and a guy who just likes to watch NBA games.
Right. So different perspective for sure from going from one side to the other. So what are some things in year one, having been now in ministry for a solid year, that stand out to you as things that you maybe didn't appreciate or didn't know were coming, or lessons learned?
Yeah. Some things I definitely have a better perspective on. First, I thought of just the importance of member involvement when it comes to volunteering. There really is no small job in volunteering for a church ministry, because anything from the door greeters to the kitchen staff to people sitting up on stage and everything in between, Sunday school teachers, people even greeting in the hallways as an unofficial role, before Sunday school. There really is no small piece to the team. even as Paul says, we're all members of the same body. If your pinky toe's missing, you may still be able to walk, but you'll walk with a little bit of a limp.
Or even the nail on the pinky toe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that might be even worse than the pinky toe being gone. But yeah, I would say that in that light, the Lord's made it even more abundantly clear to me that the work of a pastor, and I'll be technical with these terms, but the work of a pastor is not necessarily ministry exclusively. The work of a pastor is primarily to equip the people for the work of the ministry. And we all know that from Ephesians chapter 4, where he talks about the different pastors, evangelists, preachers, teachers. He says to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And I think to me that's been shown as way more important. Because, if you think you get burned out as a pastor constantly doing ministry, imagine Bob over here who works a full-time job, has 4 kids at home, and then also volunteers for, 10 hours at church because no one else will pick up the slack. So I've seen more and more the importance of every single volunteer in a church ministry.
Yep. With that, one lesson that I've recently just heard come up again and again is for church members, anything that you don't serve in, any time that you don't participate, there's a good chance that means someone else is going to have to take on a second, third, or fourth role.
That's right.
So you can take on one thing, and everyone can take on one thing, or a few people can take on a lot of things, because there are just certain things a church has to do to function.
That's right.
Now, you could pare down and do very little as a church. We could say the Kirby Woods in Brownsville is going to consist of a pastor preaching on a stage for 1 hour a week, and that's it. We could technically do that.
We don't need a maintenance guy to turn on the lights.
No,
we're just walking in.
Literally just do that, whatever that entails. But that would be a sad church.
Right.
You wouldn't be fulfilling so many scriptures that are asked of us to do as a church. Where's the compassion ministry? Where's the missions ministry? Where's the fellowship? Where's the singing? Where's the, all these things we're supposed to do. So I think that's a good lesson anytime for just a member is anytime you don't do something, it's not just you not doing it. It's another person having to do 2 things or 3 things or 4 things.
Yeah, that's right. Something else I think the Lord has made even more clear to me, and I think this is more of a devotional thought, that as someone who, has opportunity to preach the gospel, stands out to me. But even for, and again, I hate saying just like you, just the layperson, the layperson matters so much to God. There's not just
we would die without lay people.
Yeah, that's right. But even, just the person who comes in and has a lot going on in their personal life and doesn't really have a whole lot of time they feel to be involved in the work of the ministry. Even for that person, this devotional thought has really stuck with me this year. And that's just the importance of holding to the promises of God's word. Specifically for me, Isaiah 55:11, that when the Lord sends out his word, it does not return void and it accomplishes what he set it out to do. And also 1 Corinthians 15:58, that when we work unto the Lord, nothing that we do is in vain, that the Lord sees that the Lord rewards that the Lord uses that. These things keep you going. Because there are some weeks, as anyone doing anything really, that you're just disappointed in what's going on. That especially in ministry, you're like, I'm doing all the right things.
Why can't we get traction?
Right. I'm bringing the word. I'm loving these people, and for some reason we feel like it's not sticking. But that's the enemy trying to lie to us. He wants us to think that everything we just did for the last couple hours and the hours preparing for it didn't matter.
Like faithfulness is not enough.
Right. But really, one thing that I found in that Pastor Ben, the lead pastor at Brownsville Baptist Church, has continued to remind me of is that the work of the ministry is steady, slow faithfulness in the right direction. You can get bodies into a building by throwing all these, big parties and stuff, but they're going to be like, tulip leaves, on a bed of roses. It just blows away when the wind comes by. But if you take your time and to steadily, faithfully, slowly do the work of the ministry, following and holding on to the promises of God, that his work does not return void, then eventually those plants will take root, and then they'll sprout out into these beautiful flowers. And when the wind comes by, they'll still be there. But it's so easy to want to run to the easy thing when we don't feel like faithfulness is working. And I think that's true even for the believer's personal life.
Weeds pop up real quick and overnight.
Yeah, that's right.
But they do come up pretty easy if you pull on them.
Yeah.
So, that's a good reminder, just the value of ministry. I think I learned with that lesson, I think I definitely learned that in my previous church, that you actually can lead a church through a healthy ministry of the word being the backbone. Mm-hmm. Like you go to, especially as a young guy, you go to all these conferences, you listen to all these people, and everyone tries to tell you how it can be done and secret to it. Right. And if you do this, then this will happen. And if you don't take this leadership course, you're not going to know how to lead people, and you're not going to know how to organize a church, and you're just going to be spinning your wheels. But eventually you find out that a lot of people make a lot of money by just blowing hot air all day, every day. Yeah. And eventually, you have to say, but I can actually lead this church with just the Bible in my hand. That's I can. Sure. Like there's enough information with the Bible and some wisdom to lead a healthy church, and you can do it.
And that goes even for, think of the congregant, who maybe is going through some marital issues, and when they want to listen and hold on to the promises of God's word, sometimes it can be difficult. That, let's say, you have a man and his wife who are going through some difficult conversations. They're arguing. Life is stressful. Work isn't going the way it should. You get home and bills are, piling up. It's just a difficult time in the home. The world may even say, well, that person's not taking care of you. That person's not supporting you enough. That person is holding you back. So you need to just leave them. But when we follow God's word, we see that when he's the center of the home, that he can bring the peace that passes understanding, that he can provide for us, that if we follow him, that he'll provide for his children. And that usually takes more time than just ditching it and trying to restart with someone else. Mm-hmm. So even thinking for each person's individual life, the promises of God, they may seem like they're never going to come, but they always do come. There was a quote by Robert Smith Jr., who's a well-known preacher in Alabama, that I heard recently. And he said this. He said, "The God of the promise is able to be faithful even when the promise of God seems to us to be in jeopardy." The God of the promise is faithful even when we think that the promise of God is in jeopardy. I think when you understand that God, that every promise is yes and amen in Jesus Christ, that God always provides, that his word is true, that'll keep you going through almost anything, because you know that your God's bigger than your battles.
Yep. I'm reminded of Psalm 46, one of my favorite passages about how when God's in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. Yeah. And that's true for a church. Yeah. And as a pastor, what you have to make sure is that basically you have a ministry of fighting for God to always be in the center of the church. Yeah. And if that's the case, you'll be okay. Yeah. Cool.
I think one other thing that I could point to, just maybe from a minister, a pastor's perspective, is just even for the church members to remember to pray for their pastors in this way. It's so easy, and there's different seasons of it. I think you'd agree with me. There's some seasons where it's very easy for the busyness of the ministry, the busyness of church work, to remove us from a slow, personal, faithful walk with Christ. Mm-hmm. The other day I was reading in 2 Corinthians, and this really stuck with me. 2 Corinthians 11:3, Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, and he says, "I fear that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your minds may be seduced from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ." The enemy wants us to leave the simple things, the things that we see as simple, but are really just the building blocks of your walk with Christ. Like as someone who's doing ministry, who's spending hours a week preparing for lessons, planning for events, ministering to people in the community, and different things like that. It's easy for me to see those things as, well, that's a lot bigger and a lot better than my personal devotion time. That's a lot bigger and a lot better than my personal prayer time with Christ. And it's easy for the enemy to deceive us. You talked about Steve Lawson and other guys like that who find themselves, 5 years into adultery. They didn't just wake up there one day. It's a slow fade, progressing further and further away from a pure and simple devotion to Christ, and just staying busy and not really walking with Him.
Yeah, I remember what I preached at Dylan and Caleb's ordination service recently was that reminder to fan into flame what God has placed in you, that encouragement. Right. And that word really means it's like a rekindling. So it assumes that something was once there and it must be maintained throughout life. Like you have to, the flame will go out if not addressed. Yeah, that's right. So you have to constantly come back and make sure that there's logs on the fire, or else you become one of those guys that's just running a business, and there's, you run your church like that, and you look up and you're just shuffling through day to day, and you're like, next meeting, next to do, cross off the to-do list and move to the next week. Yeah. And it can become very, very mechanical, and you won't notice it, but you'll just be dying slowly inside until you look up and realize it.
Yeah. And even on that, I think it's important for people to understand, and obviously I think I understand even more now, that pastors, ministers of the gospel are regular people too. Yeah. We were people who were once, enemies of God, and now are friends of God. We were children of the devil, and now we're children of God. And we are each progressing from one degree of glory to the next. We're going through sanctification as well. So there will be moments when we're discouraged. There will be moments where our devotional life takes a hit. And I think having people in the congregation praying for their pastor, especially the importance of praying for your pastor, so that he is strengthened and encouraged, giving them, notes here and there. The most special moments of my last year at Brownsville, they are such a sweet congregation, a generous congregation. They're such an encouraging congregation. I mean, there's times where, maybe I have a rough night with the youth, or, we plan an event, it doesn't go as the way I think it should, or I was hoping that it would. And I'm kind of walking out, head kind of low, kind of defeated. And then someone comes by and says, "Aaron, can I just tell you how much I thank the Lord for your ministry here? Mm-hmm. Can I just tell you how much you're valued, how grateful I am that the Lord brought you here?" Moments like that, when a member encourages or is praying for their pastor, he struggles with things too. And that might just be enough to kick up that fire a little bit more.
Yeah, that's some gasoline.
Yeah,
right.
Throw some gasoline on there.
It does help. I guess let me ask another follow-up question. Have you sensed in your life, and when you went to full-time vocational service, did you sense a change in the spiritual attack on your life? Did you notice maybe that it's actually harder? Did anything change in that? Like maybe more of an enemy target?
Yeah.
Did you sense anything like that?
I think I definitely did. We just went through a series with our youth on spiritual warfare. It was a series called Warrior, talking about being able to stand firm in the midst of spiritual battle. And as much as it was for the youth, it was almost more so for me, because I definitely think there's a difference. This is not to shed any doubt on anyone's value. Every person, every believer is valuable to the Lord. And every person, every believer is going to be attacked by the enemy. But if we ask ourselves from the enemy's perspective, how much more of a victory is it for him, though we know he won't get the ultimate victory? How much more of a disgrace to the name of Christ is a member who sits on the back, doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't doesn't walk with Christ at all, just goes to church to basically a cultural Christian, someone who just goes to church because that's what grandma told me to do. If that person falls into sin versus thinking back again to Steve Lawson and some of the other bigger names in Dallas and around the country recently, if someone who has a direct spiritual impact on thousands of lives in some cases, if that person falls into sin,
right.
It is way more.
Yeah, it's just math. It's pure math. You can, if you hit that guy, how many come with him?
And again, that's why I would say pray for your pastor. Again, there have been weeks where I have felt personal spiritual warfare and just a heaviness and discouragement. And then something changes, and I don't want to sound all weird and crazy.
Sorry, get weird. That's fine.
But something changes in my day, and I'm not even kidding. I could show text messages as examples, and like an hour later, I get a text from a church member from maybe one of my youth's parents, and they say, "Hey, brother, just want to let you know I was praying for you this morning."
Right. And if they would have elected not to tell you that, maybe they did pray for you, but they just didn't tell you.
It still changed my day.
How cool is that? I have those same exact moments where there's been days where I'm like, I don't know if either I'm just if pastors just have spiritual attack, or if we are just a generally depressive kind of people, like if we're just easily depressed, Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's probably not depression. It's probably just that we are routinely attacked, and you're just trying to
agree.
Because I know for me, like I go in and of it and I get out of it, and I think that's just that's how I know that it's just it's the prayers.
I'll even say like this week, Monday was rough for me. I just woke up and I just wasn't feeling it.
Yeah. I have a policy: don't believe anything on Monday.
Yeah. But I went to a coffee shop and I was like, man, I just need to spend some time in the Word. And I left there, and I'm still hyped up from that intentional kind of time of refocusing, in the middle of those attacks.
Yeah. Excellent.
One other thing, a couple other things maybe. I have three more on kind of my list that I put together. The first is maybe to someone who's starting in ministry. I say this like I have a crazy amount of experience. I really don't. Most of these are things that other people have told me. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Let me take that from you. Or even maybe someone again in their own family. I'm trying to think about the application to the church member. Don't overestimate what can be done in a year, but don't underestimate what can be done in more than a year.
Right.
And by that, I think even to my own experience, I came into a culture, I think even within the youth group, that for a couple of years had been lacking some discipleship and direction and vision. So when I came, and even, the parents and the search team let me know, like, there's going to be a lot of groundwork. It was almost starting from ground zero with this group. And those first couple months, I thought, man, I'm going to come in here and, it's going to be excitement and it's going to be growing and moving and going. And really, for the most part, the youth I have now are still the youth that I had when I came. But I see...
Well, you're a failure then.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's what I need to hear today. Yeah, back to the Monday depression. But what I've seen is that if I look back to when I first came to where I am now, there's a huge difference in them personally.
Right.
And I never would have seen that in the first couple months, but I see it clear as day now. And all that to say is don't, overestimate, like, man, I'm going to come in and, let's apply it to the church member. You're having issues with your family. Some things are going on. Your children are rebelling, whatever it might be. So you're like, I need to spend some more time praying for my kid who's walking away from the faith, it seems. So, you're like, oh, I'm going to start praying, and, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah,
the
by
Lord's
next week.
Yeah, by next week, he's going to be back in church, and, he's going to surrender to ministry. I don't know.
Right. Maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah. Don't overestimate that. Now pray that in faith. You talked about Hannah praying for a son in faith. but also don't underestimate what God can do with, like we said earlier, your slow faithfulness,
Right.
To follow Him.
The thing about Hannah, just to revisit that, what I thought was so cool about that text was that she, in some ways, resolved to live in faith before the answer was even given. You know, it was sort of like, I'm going to get up, I'm going to eat, I'm going to go back to the family, I'm going to, you know, sort of rejoin society here when I had completely disconnected from all things, and I'm going to choose to worship, even though God hasn't given me a son yet. And I think that was the biggest picture from that.
I think I would have been more critical to that kind of perspective before I took, you know, this ministry job, and the Lord's really grown me over the last year and a half, as He did when I was an intern and as a member here. But I think I would have been more critical. Like I would have said, oh, well, that's like a name it and claim it, you know, blab it and grab it kind of whatever thing. We don't do that. But there's a big difference in motive and also in who gets the glory. You know, you imagine, you see that, you know, the Lord gets all of the glory for that. Even, you know, with John the Baptist, and when through, you know, the situations involving his birth, the Lord received all the praise and the glory for the miracle worked there. So while we don't try to name it and claim it, manifest stuff, we have a God who does awesome things, and who loves to provide good things for His children, whether they're what we think are good or not. He loves to provide good things for His children, and He's
genuinely glorified when we hope in
That's
in
right.
Him.
That's right.
When we actually display our faith publicly before He has given us the thing that we want, I think He is greatly glorified in that and gets a lot of pleasure out of that. And so that's, if for nothing else, that's why we need to be like that.
Yeah. One other thing that really stood out to me, that was a long pause. One other thing that stood out to me, and something I need to remind myself about, is not to take others' burdens too personally. Not to take others' burdens too personally, but rather when we lay our burdens at Christ's feet in prayer through the reading of His Word, when we lay our burdens at Christ's feet, we can even lay the burdens that other people have put on us. A lot of the burden of ministry that I've faced, and even Zoe has faced over the last year and a half, is dealing with students whose parents, you know, obviously don't come to church, but who don't even care about them. And even in some cases, some students have had abusive parents, parents in jail and prison for the horrible things they've done to their youth. And that's a lot of weight when someone unloads that on you.
Yep.
And I had to learn quickly to take that to Christ. Because it is difficult, because, you know, when you're in the business of doing ministry to people come with their burdens and their problems, and even in our congregation, you have friends who have burdens and have issues that they'll load on you.
Yeah.
But always take that to Christ.
I've learned really that I can personally be deeply invested in about 2 or 3 real things in people's lives at a time. Like,
that's right.
Like the kind where you're checking in on them regularly, you're asking how this is going to go, you're following up, you're meeting, and you're discipling, and you're doing all the mentoring, and you're doing that. With a full-time job, you know, that we can do about 2 or 3 of those at a time. I've found.
Yeah.
Beyond that, you've probably felt this feeling at some point in the last year where you're like, I don't have any more room. This sounds terrible to say.
Yeah.
I don't have any more room to care about new things in my life. Not that I can't. It's not that I don't want to. It's that there's a limit that any human has of
I'm
how
finite.
Yes, how many burdens you can actually comprehend and take and into. And so, like, if nothing else, I have a great appreciation for God, you know, for what Jesus can do as the intercessor. Or if He's like, yeah, I'll just handle 1 billion of your problems right now. But that's, for us, we're so limited to be able to do that. And so I think we have to know our limitations, and you also have to have other people in your church that you can take people to and say, hey, I can't, maybe I'm not the guy that you need to meet with every week, but do you know Do you know Frankie over here?
Yeah.
Do you know?
And even sometimes that's knowing other members in the church who have been through the same things.
Right.
There's
And if they're willing to talk about it,
Right.
now you have another counselor. And they don't have to be a certified biblical counselors, but they just can say, I can meet with this person and I can talk to them about what I went through.
In the summer of 2021, when I was an intern at Geyer Springs in Little Rock, the men's minister, I can't remember exactly what his title was, or really the recovery minister over kind of drug recovery, different things. He was used in mighty ways by the Lord to impact so many people's lives. And a lot of it was because he had been through the same things. He was once homeless. He was once strung out on drugs. And because he could relate to those people, the Lord used that in a mighty way. And really in the same way, if you think about all the people, even if you took a church of 20 people, all those people have different experiences, different things the Lord has brought them through. And anyone who comes into that church with a problem can probably relate to at least one of those church members and find the same hope in the gospel that they did.
But no, that's a valuable lesson for especially a first-year pastor to know that there's just a limit to how much I can't Superman this thing.
You almost feel guilty though when you say, "Hey, I got to pass this on to someone else."
Right, you do, because the expectation is that you can handle everything, or that you know everything, or that you can be all things. But what that person may not understand is that they're the fifth person who has come to you this week with a heavy thing.
Right.
And my experience has been usually these things aren't like once every few months. Usually it'll be like nothing for 2 months, and then 5 things happen in 1 week.
Yeah.
And it's just like boom, 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 and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed. And then you got an extra event that week, and it's your week to preach, and you got to you're just like, oh man, I'm dying. Yeah. That's usually how it goes because the nature of the work is it's in waves.
Yeah. But isn't it good that we have a Savior whose yoke is easy and who takes on our burdens, who's gentle and lowly in heart, and gives us rest?
If you learn to actually avail yourself of that, yes. A lot of guys will never, ever cross that bridge. You kind of stay in, I got this mode.
I think it's a tactic of the enemy.
Yeah, it is, because that's a path to burnout.
That's right.
That's another path to burnout
is
to believe, to actually believe that you can solve all people's problems yourself is one of the fastest paths to burnout.
We forget that the whole purpose of gospel ministry is pointing people who can't do anything about their sin to pointing to someone who has paid the price of their sin.
Right.
And the same is true for our burdens.
Yep.
Burdened people who can be pointed to someone who can comfort and give them peace and give them release from those burdens.
Yeah, that's it.
If I could add one last one, if we have time for it.
Give us one more.
Kind of maybe a lighter one, but finding a healthy escape is very important. Not only just for the person in full-time ministry, but again, I imagine the father working 70 hours a week to provide for his kids at home, or the mother who has 4 children at home to raise up and spend time with, and has a lot of things going on. It is so important for us to find a healthy escape. Now, there doesn't need to be something that we rely on more than Christ. Like, I'm not telling you, well, I feel really good when I go down to Tunica or whatever and go to the casinos. But finding something that's healthy. For Zoe and I, if we go out of town, even if it's just a 1-day trip, and just go and breathe.
Yeah.
That's how we recharge. And often those are, some of the sweetest devotion times too, when you kind of take a step back from everything, and breathe. I know a pastor in the Memphis area, who, I thought it was funny. It's not someone I would expect to do this. But I learned from someone else that his healthy escape, is playing video games, and between the hours of, 11 to 2 a.m., he'll sit there and he'll play video games. The kids are asleep. His wife is good. She's going to sleep. And he said, as long as everyone's good, I'm going to go play video games. And he said, like, no kidding. He's like, I could not do this if I didn't have that healthy escape. And obviously
4 hours of Tetris.
yeah. But there's things that we need to do, whether it's golf. Like I went and played disc golf with some other youth pastors recently, and that was probably one of the best days I've had in the last year and a half.
One thing is a lot of people have lost hobbies. People don't have hobbies anymore because of the reliance on the smartphone and because of the reliance on social media. People have lost hobbies. They used to have this other thing in their life that they did for fun. Now people, for fun, sit in front of their phone.
And we say we don't have time for hobbies, but you look at your screen time and you've been on your phone for 4 hours today.
and usually that's the double compounding thing, is that usually the phone and the internet, the socials, compound the anxiety and the depression, and they cause it actually. We run to them for the release, but in reality, they're not the escape. They actually bring you back to
their taskmaster.
Yeah, they bring you back to the thing you're running from.
That's 100%.
And so if you can have some other kind of hobby or that just gets you out of that cycle, it's much, much better for you.
Even if it's going on a date with your wife.
Yeah, I mean, a new restaurant.
Restaurant.
I get a huge hit. I don't even know what the word is. A hit?
Best day of my week.
High. Yeah. Whenever I go to a restaurant I've never been to before, it's a huge thing for me.
Kitchen Table. The kitchen. Have you been to the Kitchen Table in Arlington?
No. I haven't.
Okay. Well, if you need an escape sometime,
okay.
If you need a good hit, I went there for lunch today with one of my best friends. The Kitchen Table in Arlington.
Okay. Comfort
phenomenal.
Food? Sounds like comfort
food.
Right.
It's like an old house that they turned into a restaurant, kind of like how Side Porch is. But,
right.
Anyways, amazing food. So if you and Abby need a hit, go over to the Kitchen Table.
That sounds good. I love it, man. Especially if it's in a city or a part of town that I've never been to. That's like double bonus points.
Yeah, that's right.
And triple points if I found it on Yelp. And that's just, for some reason, I feel like I found something.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay. Well, good. And that's some good lessons. A year in the books, and hopefully many more to come in ministry. Willing. And so ladies and gentlemen out there, this is say goodbye for the last time to Aaron. No, I'm just kidding. Just a good reflection on a special window in time for you.
Yeah, it's good to be back on the podcast.
You can never get back that window of what it's like, those first reflections, you know, because you'll forget this mode you're in right now. In 10 years, you'll forget it, seriously, and you'll have to go back to this podcast to even remember what you were like.
I'll keep it saved. I'll download it somewhere and listen to it monthly.
That's good. So, awesome. Well, I'll try to think of one last question for you. What do you think was the did you learn anything here from Kirby that benefited you out at Brownsville?
A lot. Everything.
If you had to dial back, like maybe like one thing, what was something that you picked up here during this time and it made you better where you were going?
I'm going to be cliche for Kirby maybe.
Okay.
But say missions.
Okay.
Even just as a way of a reminder, as I'm teaching the youth, just the way that I grew up at Kirby, this is constantly my thought that maybe one of these youth will get this one day and the Lord will use them on the mission field to reach people who have never heard the gospel.
Right. Because you've seen so many missionaries.
Right, because I've seen it happen so many times. Out. Yeah, and just the emphasis on missions. Even now I'll run into people at conventions, at conferences, and they ask, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to before you were at Brownsville? And I'll say Kirby Woods. And one of the first things that some of them, it's actually more often than I think, are like, oh yeah, I know Kirby, and they'll always say something about missions as one of the first things they say. That missions footprint, you can't really shake it, and that's personal, of course, for me.
Yeah.
That missions footprint stays.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's good. I'm glad that stuck in the DNA. It goes with it because that'll go with you wherever you go. Awesome. Well, let's wrap up. Thanks for being back on the podcast, man.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do it every year. We can do an annual hashtag
the annual review.
Remember the ATI.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hope you guys have a great week, and share this podcast with a friend, with a family member. And give us a rating and a review. If you've never done that, we need some more ratings and reviews for the algorithms to like us. And hope to see you guys in church. If you're looking for a good church and you're in the Memphis area, come see us at Kirby Woods this Sunday at 10:30. And I guess if you're up in Haywood County,
That's right.
you could make a stop off at Brownsville Baptist Church.
10:15 a.m.
There it is. All right, you'll be doing music and preaching sometime.
that's right.
Some weeks here.
Yeah.
I call that the Jared special. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you have a great week. See you.